Hello and welcome to The Life You're Made For. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Pinney. Often our world feels reactive, confusing, and chaotic. On this show, we're going to slow down together. Take a breath, listen, and learn. We'll be joined in conversations with influential thinkers who will help us make new connections, understand our unique potential, check the beliefs we hold, and learn how to overcome unexpected challenges. I know that each and every one of us holds our own inner clarity, confidence, and courage, what I call 3C living and leading. So let's go after it together. I'm cheering you on. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to have a colleague of mine and now is becoming a dear friend, Laurie Barkman. How are you doing?
Hi, Heather. I am doing great. Thank you for having me on your show. It is going to be a great conversation. I'm so delighted.
Yes, we always have great conversations. And I love one of my favorite titles you carry as an entrepreneur in the work that you do is a business Sherpa. It's just awesome. What a great title. I'm like, oh, I wish I would have thought about that, man. A leadership Sherpa. That's just a great title.
It's something that we guide, right? We guide. We don't have
Yes.
all the answers.
Yes.
And yeah, it's funny. I get a lot of reaction, which is great because I try to make it memorable too.
Yes. Well, it is. It sticks with me. So before we jump in and talk about all the things we're doing in our lives and in the journey that we've gotten to where we're at, tell our listeners a little bit of who you are, what you do.
Yeah. I'm Laurie Barkman, the business transition Sherpa, and I guide owners from transition to transaction, from creating value to letting go. And I think to summarize, my mission is to guide entrepreneurs to have their own life-changing succession stories.
Mm.
And it's about the vision that they have and the
Mhm.
execution.
Oh, I love it. Vision and execution. Oh boy, those have to go hand in hand, don't they?
They do. They do.
Yeah, that's where I've seen people get stalled, right? The vision, they have the vision, but they usually need to bring in a Sherpa, a guide, a coach to come alongside and say, let me support you with the actual execution of it.
Yeah. People want accountability. And a lot of times we're so busy, it's hard to focus on what you need to be focused on. I think the other challenge a lot of owners have, business owners have, is they don't necessarily know what they should be working on. And that so as a Sherpa and as a guide, I advise business owners in the lower middle market, and I try to help them understand what are some of those potential pitfalls. What are the gains and what are the pains? And the gains are this upside potential could be unlimited. The downsides are the things that we might not be aware we're stepping in or tripping over that could be detractors from our company value. And let's face it, by the time it comes for you to exit your business, and 100% of business owners are going to leave their company one day, but very, very few are prepared. And so when we get to that point, they think they can plan the exit and execute at the same time. You can't. You can't do exit planning while you're exiting. It's too late.
Gosh, I love that thought. I know who I'm going to call when I'm ready to exit something. You're right. Even just all the emotions that go along with that, and just the process of letting go is such an emotional process, so that you can exit. And I think that's as we've talked about in several conversations, it's been so fun to see where our work kind of intersects. I'm looking at your book in the background, Business Transition Handbook. And you've really mapped out the process of the transition. And of course, in the work I do, it's really where I meet people. I call it the crossroads of their life. Do I go north? Do I go south, west, east? Do I turn left, right? To be able to, what I call, camp at the crossroads with them to get the clarity they need. You said it earlier, we don't have the answers. We're just willing to step into that space, trusting that they have the answers within them, but we got to ask the right questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We ask the right questions, we provide the frameworks, and we hold them accountable. And I think the biggest benefit that I see with clients is finding clarity. So many questions are swirling in their heads, and being an owner, being a CEO is a lonely place, and they're in their head a lot. And maybe they can confide in a business partner, or if they're equity partners, maybe not. They could be on opposite sides of the table with a business partner.
Right.
I have one client that didn't send their partner to jail, but they probably could have. They ended up buying them out, but there was something shady going on there. And that was a reason that predicated the transaction where my client bought out his partner. In other situations, you have married couples who
Mm.
are working together and they don't want to talk about it at home.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
they want to try to step away from it.
Yeah.
All kinds of different scenarios, reasons why business owners are feeling a little bit lonely,
Mhm.
and they might struggle with some of these bigger decisions that they need to make at some point.
Mhm.
So what do? They kick the
Mhm.
can.
Mhm.
So I said, don't be a can kicker. This is an
Mm.
opportunity. That's why I have my podcast called
Mhm.
Succession Stories. I want people to listen to it, and I want them to think
Mhm.
about their own scenario. That I want them to learn. And then the book is also really, I call it the handbook on purpose. I want you to dog
Mm.
ear it, write in it. And I'm
Mhm.
creating a course, a whole other
Mm.
learning environment with videos
Sure.
and how-to tools so that people can learn in that way if that better suits them. And
Yeah.
the more people that I can reach with this message that you can't do exit planning when you're exiting, and
Mhm.
if you have more time on your side to make change, isn't that a good thing? And by the way,
Mm.
the big secret, which isn't really a secret, but
Mhm.
the big news about doing value planning and exit
Mhm.
planning and succession planning, all these things intertwine. It's going to make your business not only more valuable, but more
Mhm.
enjoyable. Don't
Mhm.
you want to have a more enjoyable business? Don't you
Yeah.
want to be able to work less hours, have less
Mhm.
stress, and
Mhm.
ultimately know that you're on the right course for maximizing a transaction at some point in the
Mhm.
future? And that transaction doesn't have to be to a third party. It could be to family. It could be an ESOP. It
Mhm.
could be to management buyout. I don't predict how people sell, or
Mhm.
a sale is used, that term is used generically. um,
Mhm.
it could definitely be a succession in the family, but
Mhm.
that is still a transaction, and
Mhm.
there's still legal paperwork that has to be
Right.
done, and there's
Right.
still evaluation that needs to be set. So
Right.
just really good to understand also, and sort of check in
Mhm.
with yourself as an
Mhm.
owner. And a lot of people who don't do that find that
Mhm.
um, they experience regret. They
Mhm.
experience regret after the sale. There's lots of reasons why people experience regret, but that's the other part of my mission. Is I want people to not only to maximize the value, I
Mhm.
want them to avoid exit regret. So there's the
Exit
gain and there's the
regret. Mm.
pain, and
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
always talking about both.
Mhm. I love that. Exit regret. That's good. Well, my show is called The Life You're Made For. And one of the things I've loved in our conversations is going after the life that you're made for. And I want to back us up a little bit and say, what made you say, there's a niche in this world that I want to fill? This transition business Sherpa. Sorry, did I get that right? Your title?
Business transition Sherpa. Yeah.
Okay, reflip it, everyone. Business transition Sherpa, because I love that title. But tell us a little bit of where you came from and how you transitioned into really creating this area that you have put out there. I love it.
Oh, thank you. I'll talk about the near term, like the last 5 years, and then I'll rewind a
Mhm.
bit for the entrepreneurial story. But in the shorter term, I was a CEO of a subsidiary of a privately held company. So my unit
Mm.
was about 10% of the total company. And the company was pretty big. It was over
Mm.
$1 billion in revenue. And it was a third generation privately held company in the transportation logistics space. And my business unit, we were looking for somebody to come in and replace the CEO. It was a very thoughtful
Mhm.
succession. They hired in from the outside, and they were looking inside as well. But for me, I was an outside candidate. And it was a great process. It took about 6 months,
Mm.
but it was exciting, and I was thrilled to be there. And I
Mm.
was thrilled to be there for the next 20 years, right? That was sort of the vision.
Mhm.
Was I was in my young 40s, and I was going to, have my own succession with this company one day.
Mhm.
And I'm super excited for that. But that didn't happen. No, I was not there for 20 years. I was there for 3. And the reason why it was such a shorter tenure, it was because there was a pretty big transaction that
Mm.
happened in the midpoint. I was there a year and a half, and our company was acquired by a global Fortune 50. And so for me and the other executives that went through the M&A process,
Mm.
um, it went relatively quickly, but it gave me a front row seat to what that looks like, right? And a
Mhm.
major playbook from a major corporation, but also the other side, which was the integration and then joining that business on the other side of the transaction. And then there were people who did not join.
Mm.
That included the family members and some others. And so just that whole transition,
Mm.
it just got me thinking, um, I think a lot of ways it was a big success. It was a
Mhm.
success for the family and how they were thoughtful about what they did after the exit.
Mhm.
It was a success for the stakeholders, the community, and
Mhm.
myself and others who had equity in the company.
Mm.
And and then so there was the financial aspect, there was their personal family aspect. And then I also think about just the whole longevity of that company.
Mm.
My boss at the time was the chairman. He was third generation. So again,
Mhm.
over 100-year-old company. And at every turn, at every transition, when they had the
Mhm.
next generation take over, when they got the baton, they did something different. They did something
Mm.
different in the industry.
Mhm.
And that stuck with me. And so the three pillars, ultimately, when I decided to create my practice, were innovation, growth, and transition. And those were things that resonated with me from this experience as a CEO, but then also and going through the exit, but then also as I looked back in my career,
Mhm.
and I can rewind a bit on that, but those three things had resonated with me throughout my career and just they
Mm.
manifested as in a this different way, um, going through the mergers and acquisitions process. So that's
Mm.
from a shorter time horizon as I think about what predicated my motivation, it
Mhm.
was wanting to support entrepreneurs in this phase of their journey.
Oh wow, I love that. It makes me think of the research I did in my doctorate. Um, and I started calling it the four tires because as we start doing transitions in life and identity formation and kind of reinventing ourselves, we're both middle aged and we've decided, I think there's something else I'm made for and I want to go for it. And I'm not quite sure what it is, but I'm gonna coach myself through this transition, so to speak. And what came out in the research was these four areas for identity formation and reinventing who they are. They have to really be aware of what I call the first tire of fulfillment, what fulfills them, what affirms them, like where have they felt affirmed in their purpose and their value in this world. And then the other two tires were about where do they want to grow and where do they want to achieve. So as you're talking about growth, I'm just hearing that connection. And as you talked even about the innovation and transition, these are all the things that are connected to how we grow and develop as humans. And of course, my area is it's not necessarily the business industry, but we both have said we're both saying the same thing. You're sitting there focusing on the transition. I'm doing more personal life transition. You're focusing on the business transition. I guess I want to talk a little bit more about how that intersects. And I'm thinking about the emotional intelligence around what is required as we do transitions.
There's a lot of things that I think from an emotional intelligence standpoint we can be doing
Mm-hmm.
when we think about ourselves and our identity.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to exit regrets, there are definitely some factors that can be reasons why people have regrets after the exit. One of the reasons is the identity with the business. Are you a business owner or do you own a business? And if I
Mm-hmm.
say I'm a business owner, right, that label
Mm-hmm.
is one way to self-reflect and say, oh, wait a minute. Or
Mm-hmm.
am I more arm's length? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I own several businesses, right? So if I own one, but I work in it every day and it's my job, my identity is probably very tied in. Also, my social relationships might be very tied in with my company. My name might be on the door. I'm the founder or I'm a family member, and my name is literally on the door.
Mm-hmm.
And so those things all help shape identity. There's other things that help shape identity too, but those are more some of the common ones. And I think checking in on that and the roles that we play. I like your four tires examples. The affirmation of what are the roles that you have outside the company? Who are
Mm-hmm.
your relationships with? And what brings you joy and excitement? I have a tool that is a personal readiness to exit questionnaire, and it helps frame four different drivers. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the drivers is kind of focused on some of these areas, how you see yourself and what are some of the relationships. And the exercises are really good. And I've incorporated some of these things into my course as well because and this is course one, by the way, not course three. And I did that on purpose. Even in the book, right? I started with the
Mm-hmm.
personal readiness to exit types of frameworks. I
Mm.
call it the transition mindset. You know,
Oh,
the
I
more
love that.
the more that you are
Mm-hmm.
able to dial in and be open-minded towards a transition, the better off you'll be. So let's take I always talk about this concept with people who aren't psychologists. So you'll probably appreciate, hopefully I'm using it in the right context, but I like to talk about cognitive dissonance and
Mm-hmm.
this concept that, the mind and the body have to go together. And if you are feeling in your heart or your mind
Mm-hmm.
that you're not really that interested in working on some things that, in my repertoire of the many things
Mm-hmm.
you could work on, if you're not that interested in it, and oh, it's for years later, and oh, that's not for me, then your body's not going to follow, right? If your head
Mm-hmm.
and your heart aren't there, your body's not going to follow. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, what happens? Well, then you become a can kicker, because you're never
Mm.
going to take the time. But if you're open minded, one of the exercises I do, and I have it in the book and everything, and I do this in workshops, is I ask people, when I say the word transition, what words come to mind?
Mm-hmm.
And in my course, I give them the litany, the whole list of, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
50, 60 words. And I want them to choose 15. And then I want them to
Mm.
narrow it down to 5.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me if those words have a negative connotation, positive or neutral. And
Mm.
in the workshop, it was fun, over time, it's so funny when people give you feedback. I used to do my own labeling of, oh, well, we'll put this in positive, we'll put this in
Mm-hmm.
negative, we'll put this in neutral, because I was trying to save time in the workshop. And then someone, politely raises their hand and go, well, Laurie, I
Mm.
disagree with you. I don't think that's a negative. I think that's a positive. And it was like
Mm.
that blinding flash of the obvious that yes, transition mindset is in the eye of the beholder. It's how
Yes.
you feel about it, not how
Yeah.
I feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, having a transition mindset, being open to thinking about change and what impact
Mm-hmm.
it can have on you personally is really important. Because if you actively participate, then what will happen?
Yeah.
Well, again, everything will follow.
Yeah. Okay, so you're making me think of this other theory. It's a change theory that I just loved. It's stuck with me. When you take classes, this was back in my master's. I think I was in my 20s and I'm in my 50s now, but I don't think I remember much of anything from my master's. But this was one of those things that stuck with me, and I've used it throughout my coaching. This idea, and it's a word picture of 3 different groups of people that are the pioneers who are pioneering out and starting a town. You have then the town planners, and you have then the settlers. Have you heard this theory?
No.
Oh, it's really fascinating. But it's to your point, as you prepare for the transition and the mindset, would you call it the transition mindset? I really like that term. It's understanding, are you a pioneer? Like, does the idea of change just excite you and make you super excited and you're always driving west? Are you a little bit more of a town planner that says, okay, we've gotten to as far as whatever, Colorado. I'm not ready to go to California, but let's settle Colorado together. Or are you like one of those settlers that's saying, man, I am not moving anymore. I just want to stay here, have my family, and like settling is my thing. And I think sometimes when we do fear about transition, we don't have that. You talk about identity. We don't have that personal identity of understanding who we are. And when I began to realize that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a pioneer. I love pioneering, and other pioneers are going to get me. But I also need the town planners and the settlers in my work or in my life, because you can't just pioneer your whole life. So it's learning how to appreciate not only who you are, but also the people that surround yourself.
Yes, I agree with that. I like that a lot. I'm going
Isn't
to
that
do some
great?
research on that after we talk. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll send something over to you. In fact, everyone else
Okay.
listening, I'll put
I
something in
love
the
that.
show notes. I've got a coaching tool that I use around it. It just gives you a brief synopsis of it. And it's a really old theory, but I resurrect it all the time with my clients because it's still something that's stuck with me. So as you're kind of looking at this idea of transition and identity, what have you learned about people and how they handle transition?
I think a lot of people don't handle it well
Mm,
because they get so focused on the transaction,
mm,
and those are the professionals they have working with them closer in, right? I'll be
mm-hmm,
ready in a year. I'll be
mm-hmm,
ready in 2 years. Well,
mm-hmm.
guess what? Here's what I'm going to tell everybody. Here's another little secret. Buyers buy on their time, not yours.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of activity, and maybe some people who have a business have experienced this, where they have strangers reaching out to them saying, hey, I want to buy your business.
Mm-hmm,
I'm a member of Vistage, and Vistage has done they do these CEO pulse surveys every I don't know if they're quarterly or annually,
mm-hmm,
but the most recent one showed that a pretty high percentage of Vistage members who are CEOs, business owners, are getting solicited multiple times a week. It was
mm,
like It was a really high percentage. And then another high percentage of people are saying, I want to sell within the next 3 to 5 years, which is also coinciding with this notion of a silver tsunami. We've heard about the baby
Mm-hmm.
boomers who are going to be, either closing their doors or they don't have anyone in the
Mm-hmm.
business or family that wants the company.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of how people transition, I think, the underscore is that they haven't done planning. Most
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs have not done what I'm recommending they do, which is, of course, they can read the book, take the course, but give
Mm-hmm.
it time and space.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't.
Mm-hmm.
So as a consequence, someone rings their doorbell and says, I want to buy your house. And you're like, okay, I'll sell it. Right. But have
Mm-hmm.
you really prepared what that means to let go of your baby
Mm-hmm.
furniture and all the mementos in your home?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same when you sell a company. It can be emotional. A lot of entrepreneurs refer to their business as their baby.
Mm-hmm.
So if they haven't spent time considering what their role will be in the transition and post transaction, that can be another thing. Now, there's lots of different roles you could have, and there's no one way to do it. I think the main point is that you need to be able to admit to yourself what you want,
Mm.
and you need to express it so that you have a greater likelihood of achieving it. For example, let's say you want cash at closing, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
get nerded out on transaction stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
just to give an example, you want 100% cash at close. You don't want seller financing. You don't
Mm-hmm.
want an earn out. Financially, you want to not be tethered to the
Mm-hmm.
new owner. So, okay, you can express
Mm-hmm.
that, but maybe you'd be open to consulting, or, for certain hours a week,
Mm.
or maybe you'd be open to
Mm-hmm.
some sort of mentoring of the new owner. Maybe, you'd be,
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to a gentleman on my show, and his example was one of the owners just wanted to have lunch and go in and have lunch with
Mm.
employees every once in a while.
Yeah.
That's all he wanted,
Yeah.
and was able to execute that in the transaction. So again, I think it's
Mm.
very personal what people want for their own satisfaction, to feel
Mm-hmm.
either completely unconnected,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
connected, or somewhere in the middle. And
Mm-hmm.
expressing it, if you're working with someone like me on a transaction, making sure that your advisors know what it is you're seeking, so that when the deal's being put together, it can be surfaced. And I find a lot of buyers want to know what the sellers
Mm-hmm.
want.
I'd love that thought. I would think that's what it really mitigates exit regrets if you're really looking at what you need.
Can. You
Yeah.
can.
I love that. Um, Tell us a little bit about how you cultivated a transition mindset for yourself.
Most of my career was spent working for other entrepreneurs or big companies, and then
Mm.
back and forth. So I've spent time in startups, and I've
Mhm.
spent time in really big companies, and
Mhm.
and even on corporate startup teams where it
Mhm.
was an entrepreneurial endeavor within a well-established company. And eventually, um, I guess I found myself with certain traits, like high independence,
Mm.
highly self-motivated, self-directed, all these
Mhm.
attributes that entrepreneurs have.
Yeah.
But I never had the big idea, and I never had the money I didn't think I needed, I needed to manage my own risk with
Mhm.
my family situation, right? So for my husband and
Mhm.
I, um, we went through a big period of our lives raising
Mhm.
kids and everything, and
Mhm.
just saying, you know what, we don't want to take on too much risk. So I didn't
Mhm.
really have I think entrepreneurs have a very balanced sense of risk.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel ready to have an entrepreneurial endeavor. I
Mhm.
graduated from business school thinking that I needed to have a tech startup, in
Mhm.
1999. And that didn't happen for me. So that's why I joined a startup. I wanted
Mhm.
to kind of stay close and orbit the entrepreneurial world, but not necessarily felt confident that I could do it myself.
Mhm.
But as I got older and I got some money in my jeans from the transaction I described earlier, it
Mhm.
enabled me to start to take a little more chances and peel off an area that I felt like I could
Mhm.
contribute, have high impact, and be excited about.
Mhm.
And it's morphing into a number of things, which big piece of it is education, right? And
Mhm.
that I've created this learning platform, the Business Transition Sherpa learning platform. Again, the podcast, the book, and now the course. And now the next lever of that is going to be community. And how do I
Mhm.
bring together what I'm calling end game entrepreneurs and bring them together in a community, through masterminds and other things. And then I have signature services like like
Mhm.
advisory and of
Mhm.
course M&A transaction work.
Mhm.
Um, and I do other things too. Very fulfilling for me to have a portfolio that I am leading, and
Mhm.
ultimately what I think I'm trying to do is create something that is transferable. So
Mhm.
this knowledge base, these
Mhm.
assets that I'm creating can be leveraged and scaled,
Mhm.
so that maybe one day I'll have my own exit.
Well, yeah, yeah, I hear you. What's your ideal client?
The ideal client is in the lower middle market, I would say, from
Mm.
2 million to 20 million in revenue ish.
Mhm.
Another kind of range would be 5 to 50 million in revenue.
Mhm.
Um, they are either the founder or the acquisition entrepreneur or the next gen leader,
Mhm.
and they're starting to think about their business in a transitional manner. Um,
Mhm.
they are not the founder day one type of
Mhm.
company, right? I don't really think that the startup has a lot of things to worry about. I don't
Mhm.
think that they're quite ready for this content. So I would say a minimum of 5 years that the company has
Mhm.
existed, a minimum of 5 years, something like that.
Mm.
And that's when they can say, okay, these are things I should be focusing on to build value,
Yeah.
make my business more transferable, how to reduce risk, how to make it more attractive.
Oh, I like that thought. So even if it's a little bit more of a long-term plan to start working with you for how to add more value to your company so that it's sellable in a much higher range.
Absolutely. Again, when you have
Yeah.
time on your side, you
Right.
have more time to work on these
Of
things.
course. Oh, I love that thought. Okay, this is kind of a big question, but I'm put it out there. What has surprised you about transitioning? You can answer this for you either yourself about the process of transition, like what surprised you, or in your work with clientele, what has surprised you?
From my transition to corporate to entrepreneur.
Yes, either that or as you've worked with people transitioning, what's kind of surprised you about the process of transitioning?
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I can answer both ways.
Mhm.
Yeah, on the client side, I think the biggest surprise is I wasn't sure if people would buy into the framework, right? So I kind of
Mm.
was doing live work with the
Mhm.
clients in a framework that I created,
Mhm.
which was validating because
Mm.
essentially, I was getting paid for that work, but at the same time, it was
Mhm.
a new framework.
Mhm.
So one of the key takeaways I had was that they wanted the framework, right? They
Mm.
wanted to have somebody guiding them on the process and pointing things out. Now, in this framework of time, I also don't rush it on purpose. Could we
Mhm.
rush it? Sure, but I find that they're busy,
Mhm.
and so it didn't surprise me, but I guess just they kind of leaned in on it. Like I said, look, this is going to take 7, 8 months, and
Mhm.
we'll meet a couple of times a month. This is not going to be the number one thing you're working on. Uh,
Mhm.
and that was okay with them. So I think,
Mhm.
again, if you're not in a rush and you can take the
Mm.
time, then it
Mhm.
doesn't feel like, oh my God, it's this urgent thing. But I know it's
Mhm.
important and I know need to make time for it. I had I have a framework where I'll do some upfront diagnostics. Then we go through on a monthly basis different
Mhm.
topics and
Mhm.
kind of deeper dive. And then where do we go from there is also kind of a nice surprise where it doesn't end, and I'm
Mhm.
seeing that people want to continue to work with me on a quarterly basis, again, holding them accountable.
Mhm.
And so the other surprise that I'm finding, but it was a hypothesis I had, which is if I could become a trusted advisor, eventually they'll be ready for some sort of transaction, whether it's with
Mhm.
family, whether it's with, a third party. And so
Mhm.
some of my clients are headed in that direction, and it's taken a good year plus to get
Mhm.
there.
I love
And
that.
for me personally, I think for surprisingly, uh, I guess I've always sort of been this nascent entrepreneur that I
Mhm.
kind of let her come out of her shell a bit, and I'm not a patient executive, right? When I was CEO, I wouldn't say I was the most patient. I don't think most CEOs are,
Yeah.
but I do find a strange patience that I have with
Mhm.
myself. I do hurry to get things done. I'm highly capable
Right.
of multitasking and all those things, but at the same time, I kind of see it as a longer game, and
Mhm.
I don't get frustrated with myself that I'm
Mhm.
not pacing to something. So
Mhm.
that's been a nice surprise for myself.
Oh, that's good. Are you enjoying the shift into entrepreneurial work?
I really am. Yeah, I
Mm,
think the flexibility, like I
hmm.
said earlier, I'm so self-directed anyway.
Yeah.
And I've built a virtual team. And so it's been fun. Yeah,
Oh, that's
enjoying it.
good. Oh, that's good. Yeah, I jokingly refer to myself as probably one of the hardest driving bosses I've ever worked for.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
How do you pace yourself as an entrepreneur?
I don't know. I think every day I'm pretty dialed into my calendar. If it's on my
Hmm.
calendar, I will do it. And if I
Yeah.
don't do it today, then I will literally move that action item to
Yeah.
the next day or sometime this week. Um, so I'm trying to hold myself accountable to things I need to get done.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, recognizing I'm trying to eat my own dog food too, right? So it's like
Hmm.
I want to be strategic. I want to work on the business.
Hmm.
Um, over the last it's been a fast pace, right? I wrote a book.
Hmm.
Like I've only been at this a couple of years, right? So launched the business, wrote a book,
Great
creating a
job.
course, like creating a
Hmm.
podcast, boom, 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 boom. Um, but that's just my go, go, go. Like it's
Hmm.
just how I'm wired. It's like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing?
Hmm.
And I think I've got to let some of these things percolate and, you know, really investing in them as this platform is what
Hmm.
I'm excited about. So um, I'm going to hold myself to my marketing standards too, because I was a career marketer and managed very, very big budgets. And I like to joke, I
Mm.
managed from a dollar to $100 million, and the hundred
Yes.
million isn't the joke. So, um, but it's like that, right? We have
Yeah.
to figure out what's working, not working all the time and
Hmm.
make adjustments.
Hmm.
And I don't have to go to a committee to ask any approvals for anything. So that's kind of fun.
That is fun. Yeah, we can move at the pace we've probably been dying to do for years, huh?
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
nicer being a little older. I'm glad I didn't try and start my own business in my 20s or 30s. I I don't think I would. I probably would have burned out just because it's hard and you have to have that long game kind of perspective when you're working for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what encouragement would you give any of our listeners who are in the middle of transitioning and are feeling all the feels, but also facing the practical things that they need to be facing? What encouragement would you give them?
So, to all my business owner friends out there, I hope that you have a transition mindset and some of the things in today's conversation resonated with you. If you feel that you haven't spent enough time and that your exit timeline is approaching, if you've got a
Hmm.
kind of a mental check in on a 3 to 5 years, I definitely want to encourage you to dedicate the time to this
Hmm.
on the personal preparations, financial readiness, as well as business readiness. There's definitely things you can do. We talked about a number of resources today. And for my friends out there that are a little closer in, like the 1 to 3 years out, when you map out an exit timeline, you'll be surprised to see that actually you should really have started yesterday. So that does put a little bit of pressure on you.
Great.
I realize, but yeah, I think for the 1 to 3 year people, um, it is time. It is
Hmm.
time to start getting ready because, like I said, buyers buy in their time, not yours. So when
Hmm.
you're not ready, it really could either derail a transaction completely or just
Hmm.
never start. That's
Hmm.
the risk that you run.
I love that. I'm going to add on to that too. I'm thinking about gray space. I end it with I have 7 practices in my book, and the last one I'm thinking of is trust versus fear. Trust yourself, trust the process, trust your gut, trust your instinct, trust the plan you put in play for the 3 to 5 year transition. Trust someone like a trusted advisor or Sherpa like Laurie to support that transition. But fear really does cripple us and keep us paralyzed. And so take whatever baby step you need to start taking to prepare yourself for that transition. And I love what you're talking about with this process. I work with so many high achievers, and to give themselves that permission to pace themselves is probably the number one thing that I have to do so much. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm glad you made the decision, but we don't have to execute it like tomorrow. Like, let's talk about what that looks like, not just for your people's sake or the company's sake, but for your own personal well-being. We want to see you stay not only intact and not just surviving this, we want you to be able to thrive through this process.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that a
Mm.
lot.
Well, it's always a pleasure, Laurie. I just love it. Where can everyone find you? So I'm sure that anyone who's going through a transition, it's vulnerable, it's scary, and I'm thinking heart and head. That's the heart piece, and the head piece is like you got to get certain things signed and done and value added to it. And you got to make sure that everything you've worked for, you can get the most out of it. So I love what you're doing out there. And I just want to say, where can people find you? What's the first step that they can do if they're in the middle of transition and they need your Sherpa guidance?
I think the number one place would be my website,
Mm-hmm.
thebusinesstransitionsherpa.com. They can get all
Mm-hmm.
the goodies there, my book, my podcast, and the course.
Mm-hmm.
And if you also look in the links in the footer, you'll see links to assessments that you can
Mm-hmm.
do for free. And I even have an option for a complimentary strategy call if people want to connect with me and talk over Zoom. I'm more than happy to do that. Please let me know that you heard me on Penny's show and
Mm-hmm.
connect with me on LinkedIn,
Yep.
Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, all under the Business Transition Sherpa or my name, Laurie Barkman.
Cool. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you, and thank you for what you're doing out in the world. We need all the support we can get as we're transitioning. We live in such a dynamic world. So thank you. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course. Take care, everyone.